Hello friends, fans, and dairy products of all ages. This is Cheese of Ages here. And much like my mocking Mike Merle's videos, in which I poked at a post on the internet that was incredibly misguided in a silly way, today I'm going to be poking fun at a post on the internet that is kind of misguided and slightly stupid. This is going to be League of Legends related, as a lot of my content has wanted to be lately. And it's directed towards a recent article featured on surrender20.net, a big news site for League of Legends content. This is a Red Post collection, which often has an intense focus on putting up posts that developers made. Now this one says this appeared in a Reddit thread, but doesn't direct to the thread, so I can't really get the context that well. But it was in response to a question of whether or not there were plans for an AD itemization pass similar to the one that AP is getting, which I will link to the article about the AP item pass later. Essentially, they're buffing the fuck out of AP, because they're making their builds a hell of a lot smoother, giving utility items a big buff, and also making damage items smoother and easier to get, so you're not stunted quite as much by waiting for needlessly large rod. So essentially, they're helping fix the issue that is common in damage-focused builds, and that's the big chunky item. And AP, that's the needlessly large rod, which is dropping 300 in price, and also getting a statistic decrease, basically smoothing the builds up. But AD, in its BF sword, and its 1550 cost, isn't getting a price or and just a statistic adjustment to make smoother builds. In accordance to this little response, in which he basically says no, they're not getting an AD itemization pass because it's going to be a lot more complicated. And essentially, it goes through this AD itemization response saying no because it's more complicated, and they're setting the reason for this conclusion is that ADCs focus on optimizing for damage while ignoring utility, because their teammates often work to make it where they don't need utility. Now, why am I making a video on how this is stupid as fuck? Well, you can see in the article, or the post on the message boards for the AP items pass, that their reasoning for making the item pass to begin with is because damage-centric AP champions would hyper-optimize for damage, ignoring utility, because their teams compensate for their lack of utility, carrying them, essentially. So essentially, their reason for not doing this for ADCs is the reason they did it for APCs. And that there's a difference between the two because AP champions have more utility in their kit and are more diverse. So their reason they're not doing it for ADC champions is because AP champions don't need more utility in their items. Are you fucking retarded? It's like, oh, AP champions are more utility inclined than AD champions. Well, doesn't that mean that they don't need utility itemization if their kits are inclined to that? I mean, I'm all in favor of diversifying the AP item builds and such, and like making the utility options more attractive. But I am not in favor of ignoring AD itemization completely because of reasons that don't make any freaking sense. You know, because they're the exact same reasons you did it for the AP champions. I mean, that's just stupid. You're fixing AP itemization because they are hyper-optimizing for damage and not focusing on utility, which they don't need because their kits are usually inclined towards more utility. And meanwhile, you're not doing it for ADCs because they are optimized to damage and don't focus on utility and need more utility options. What? Why? And never mind the whole thing, changes, the imbalancing this creates with poke compositions, which were already an issue with the game before the tank meta, which caused the tank meta to appear, and is the only counter to the tank meta, is buffing them, creating the problem again. And never mind how much this further nerfs ADC champions and AD assassins, because you're buffing the hell out of mages, making defensive things, which they already had better options for defense than AD champions do. You're buffing the majority of tanks in the game because most tanks in the game are AP. You're buffing Ryze, who is one of the most imbalanced champions in the game right now, by buffing Rod of Ages, which is one of the primary items that makes him overpowered as frack with his shield. You're completely nerfing the shit out of AD assassins by making it where the start that all AP assassins with common sense go with is now more cost effective. And yeah, you're making their build progression a hell of a lot smoother by making their big chunky item that everything builds off of easier to get, so you don't have to wait 6 goddamn years to get it. But you're not doing the same thing for the AD equivalent, which all AD items are already less gold efficient than AP items, and we have much fewer utility items. You know, I understand you don't want to overly boost AD bruiser champions, because a lot of them are incredibly freaking powerful. But still, can you just lower the price and statistical advantage of BF Sword so that the build progressions are smoother? I'm tired of being an ADC and waiting a goddamn 18 million years in lane, because if I don't finish BF Sword first, I'm just going to be behind the entire game. So I'm sitting in lane for a million damn years, and whoever gets to 1550 gold first wins the game, practically. I am just annoyed as hell that their justification is that we don't like AD, we prefer AP, because we're using the same reasons why we can't do this for ADCs is the same reason we did it for AP champions. This is freaking, it's biased. You know, literally, the exact same reasons they did it for AP are the same reasons they say they can't do it for AD. It makes no freaking sense. And plus, they're not even factoring in, like, AD mid laners or AD top laners. It's like, the usual difference is that ADCs with different item builds don't really do anything fundamentally different, because the core drive of the class is to apply sustained damage as long as possible. You mean ADCs as in marksmen, because that description only applies to them. You're completely disregarding AD assassins. You're completely disregarding AD top laners, which includes some AD assassins. There's AD burst champions. I know there's not quite as many AD burst champions as there are AP burst champions. That's your fault. How about you stop making AP assassins and AP tanks and make some AD goddamn tanks and AD goddamn champions that are burst? How about you stop making AP champions every single patch? Every single fracking time. The last one that wasn't entirely AP was Gnar, and he still has AP ratios in his thing, and is a basic freaking bruiser. He's not a burst champion. Get some AD assassins in the fucking game. Don't say that the diversity of champion pool is an issue and a reason you're not doing things when you're the one that controls that. There's plenty of 80 burst champions in the game that could benefit from an itemization pass. And using the excuse that AP champions all build the same way and with no variety as a reason to give them an itemization pass, and then saying ADCs all build the same way is a reason not to give them an item pass, is just plain freaking stupid. I am sorry. You can't use the same reasons to justify something, to justify doing something, and then use the exact same reason to justify not doing something. It just doesn't make any fracking sense. And again, I know you're trying not to buff AP bruisers. Maybe you should stop buffing AP bruisers then. You know, I mean, Diana does more damage than Talon does in lane, and is like 3 times tankier. She's like an AP Vi, for crying out loud. The only thing that makes Diana remotely balanced is the fact that her Q can be tricky to hit. And for God's sakes, stop buffing AP assassins. And then saying, oh, they don't, this is assuming they need help, in response to like how this will affect AP assassins. You basically, in response to saying how it might affect the AP assassins by saying they don't need help, acknowledging that they're really powerful, and then you are continuously buffing them. You're acting like they don't need help, and you're not giving them help when you're buffing the shit out of AP items. And hell, the Zeke's Herald changes that were teased. Essentially, you build up stacks, because they're fond of making knockoffs of Static Shiv and Luden's Echo, which is a knockoff of Static Shiv. They're making a Zeke's Herald into this. They're making it where you build up stacks, and once you have stacks, you trigger damage. You trigger this effect, which is a 20% increase to AP of both champions involved, and a 50% increase to crit chance. You mean you're gonna give anybody that's AP and connected to a person that has this item a free extra death cap, and also 50% crit chance, as if there weren't any AP champions that use basic attacks heavily? This item is ridiculous. It's silly. You take this item, and in team fights, abandon the marksman. Nobody cares about the marksman anymore. Slap it on the AP mid laner. The AP mid laner now has 2 death caps, and like, oh look, Diana's there. Like, I'm gonna link this to them. She's AP and uses auto attacks, so I'm going to give her auto attacks that are already empowered by her AP. I'm gonna give her an extra death cap if she's got one, or one if she doesn't have one, and I'm also going to give her 50% crit chance on her already powerful attacks. So I'm going to essentially give her the crit increased chance of an Infinity Edge. I'm going to give her a third of an Infinity Edge and an extra death cap, for 8 seconds, like every once in a while. Are you out of your goddamn mind? Are you that desperate to have ADCs that scale with AP in bot lane? Because that's what's going to happen. With the ability to just hand your marksman a death cap, and at the same time give them 50% increased crit chance, the meta is going to be dominated by people that scale heavily off of AP and can benefit from crit, because people hyper-optimize. This version of Zeke's Herald with like a death cap and a 50% crit chance increase is going to buff the shit out of marksmen that scale decently off of having AP. And it's going to buff the hell out of mid laners that can benefit from crit chance. I mean, Diana was strong enough. Varus was strong enough in mid lane. All this stupid shit. You know, why are MOBAs always biased towards AP? It's just weird. It's silly. I don't understand. Why are you justifying not doing something by using a reason you justified for doing something? You know, in the end, with the current systems that ADCs use, any item we add simply gets evaluated as, does this potentially fit within the highest DPS build for me? Fine. Is it better than an existing item that I use? Fine. And then the item gets permanently swapped in, replacing the existing item, such that the builds are basically the same before and after. And here we go. Ability power is a relatively easy thing to optimize in the current ecosystem, and the current AP builds are a little more generic than I'd like. AP mages bring a mix of damage and utility, but the AP items have accidentally converged around damaging AP builds, far outpacing more utility or counter-centric ones. Those are quotes from the same person, justifying not doing something with the basically almost verbatim the reason he gave for justifying doing something. That's fucking stupid. Fix AD items. Give us more build diversity. Have something besides one item and a jungler enchant. Build out of Brutalizer. You know, give us some decent options for other things and utility. Nobody builds the equivalent of Riley's Crystal Scepter on AD because it basically gives no idea. Why are you buffing Riley's Crystal Scepter and not buffing freaking the hammer that's name escapes me right now? You know, why are you focusing on changing Abyssal Scepter to suit AP bruisers when you're worried about buffing AD bruisers too much? You know, why are we not? I understand like AP bruiser item rework is basically the equivalent of like Black Cleaver's rework. That's an equivalent exchange thing. But why are you increasing the efficiency in builds of one side and not increasing the efficiency of builds in this other side? Why are you massively buffing AP? And don't say this isn't massively buffing AP. Anything that built out of Needlessly Large Rod is now much easier to get because it's 300 gold cheaper. You know, that's much easier to get from my experience in games. You don't really have to sit nearly as long on your gold to get the key thing you're building to if you're a damage-focused class. Why aren't we getting a similar adjustment on the AD side? Why are you making Zhonya's, which is already one of the most cost-effective items in the game for the utility it grants, you know, the single item that every AP champion that has a brain in their head builds? Okay. Every single solitary mid laner now is going to be starting Cloth 5, which is Cloth Armor and 5 pots, and then shutting down any AD champion. And the AD assassins that should start regardless of what the enemy a mid laner is, that always start Cloth 5, are now going to be like, okay, now you can, when you complete Zhonya's, you're refunded for your Cloth Armor because we're lowering the cost by 300. We're essentially completely removing the price of the armor from the item, but not the armor from the item. Never mind the fact that you get temporary invulnerability, and the item was already nearly 10% more gold efficient than its AD equivalent. You know, before they made it much easier to build. I'm just sorry. This reasoning they give for not doing an AD itemization pass is not good enough for me. I'm sure there's things involved, but you can't just say the exact same reason you gave to do something as the justification for not doing something. That's not going to cut it. There's complications. There's complexities. Because, like, AD bruisers, AP bruisers, same thing. AP and AD champs, arsenals are virtually the same. Making AP bruisers stronger, and when they already have better defensive options for literally, there is almost no difference between building a damage AP character and a tanky AP character. Zhonya's Abyssal Scepter. Rod of Ages now is even better. Boom. Like you got like Deathcap. At some point in that sequence of itemization, you can build tanky and still have nearly the same damage as a damage-dealing AP character. I mean, seriously. What the hell, man? Why are you doing this to AD? Anyway, this is Cheese of Ages, sighing off.